everyone that I've ever worked with that is high performing, which is 98% of my client base, right, are objectively highly successful people. Some very successful, right? Billionaires, professional athletes, countless numbers of executive CEO of companies that are doing over 10 million a year, right? So a lot of very objectively successful people. And what I've come to find is that every one of those people's successes was built upon the back of their trauma. And one of the core findings that I had in looking at what was the common denominator of every SEAL was the fact that they were screwed up in the head. Specifically, they had significant childhood trauma that led to a strategy that produced more drive, more perseverance than the average person. As we've talked about many times in this show, trauma is not the experience, it's the strategy that you carry forward from experiencing a perceived loss of control early in life. Now, if trauma is merely a strategy of survival, that strategy is either going to be rewarded or punished by your world. So what I mean by that is, once our subconscious builds that strategy at 4, 5, 6 years old, if that strategy is rewarded by our environment, we experience success in our world. If our strategy is punished by our environment, we will experience friction, suffering, struggle, not success, right? Not accomplishment. And it doesn't take much to change it. Hey everyone, welcome back to Capital T Truth, the podcast. We have our first Q&A episode. So the format that we go through with our episodes is we have these core content episodes with Vicky, and then we go into guest episodes. And then after that, we get so many questions based on both the core content and the guest episodes that we do dedicated shows just to answer your questions. So first and foremost, as you're become a avid listener, hopefully, please send those questions to us through our website or through the comments. And that gives us the opportunity to answer your questions live on the show. I'm here to introduce Steve Nagib, is not only a good friend of mine, but also a partner in the True Path family. So he's one of our lead facilitators, and he comes to join me on this so I don't have to just read a question off a piece of paper and talk by myself. So welcome, Steve. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to this.
Thank you for having me. I get the job of not only reading you those questions, but also maybe following up with my own questions, which I'm very, very excited about. For those of you guys listening, Larry and I have known each other for a while. We've been teaching this content alongside of each other for a while. And this is where we get to not only hear from you guys, but Larry and I like to ping pong back and forth. I like to challenge him. He likes to remind me where my subconscious is showing up in my life. So this is not only a special opportunity for me, but I think it's a special opportunity for us to take some of this work out into the broader world. So I'm super excited. Today's episode, we're going to focus on Matt Uhler. Matt Uhler was a guest a few episodes ago, depending on when you're listening to this. And Matt's an interesting character. Matt has become a good friend of Larry and I. And when I say interesting character, what I mean by that is, on paper, he's got everything figured out, right? He's got the farm property in Arizona. He's bought and sold businesses. He's got a decent level of financial success. So objectively, he's got some stuff figured out. And on the surface, if you met Matt in the mall or in the grocery store, he's one of the happiest or seemingly happiest people I know. And I think, Larry, I think you would agree with that. The interesting part is Larry and I have been working with Matt for a while, and what's on the surface is not always what's below the surface. I listened to the conversation you had with Matt on the prior podcast episodes, and there was a few clear themes that came up in your conversation with him. One of them is love is pain. Another one is the cost of high performance, and finally the difference between receiving and earning love. And if I pick out those themes, there was quite a few questions that we got submitted. That I'm going to read one for you now, and I'd be curious what your thoughts are, Larry. This first question comes to us from Janice, and she said, so Matt, Matt's owned 20 something businesses, done 800 transactions, and started his first company at 17. You guys talked a lot about his trauma, but never really went into what it was. I get that's personal, but here's my question. Most people who go through serious traumas don't end up wildly successful. They end up stuck. What is it about certain people's traumas that turn them into machines instead of victims? And is that actually a good thing or a bad thing? What do you think, Larry?
Well, I hate to tell Janice, but you're wrong. Just flat wrong. What I mean by that is, you can, Steve, you can say the exact quote, but there's something along the lines of most people's traumas don't lead to success, something like that. What was her exact quote?
Yeah, most people who go through serious trauma don't end up wildly successful. And Larry, I have to
Okay.
remind you, you have to be nice to these listeners.
Oh,
Be nice to Janice.
Janice, thank you for sending the question. And that statement is wrong. Now, that would be commonly held, right? It would be a commonly held understanding that you look at the homeless person on the side of the road and you think, oh, this person must have had some horrible thing occur in their life. That's how they ended up on the side of the road. And you look at Michael Jordan as the best basketball player ever and be like, oh, he definitely did not have some serious trauma as a child that led to his success. I'd say one of the most interesting discoveries, if you would say, that I've created, not created, that I found was that uh, everyone that I've ever worked with that is high performing, which is 98% of my client base, right, are objectively highly successful people. Some very successful, right? Billionaires, professional athletes, countless numbers of executive CEO of companies that are doing over 10 million a year, right? So a lot of very objectively successful people. And what I've come to find is that every one of those people's successes was built upon the back of their trauma. And that really led from my initial discovery of figuring out what was the common thread among successful SEALs, because I going through SEAL training, the guy that I would have bet my bottom dollar was going to quit in the second day, and the guy that I bet was going to be the head of our class, the most successful, the guy that I thought was going to be the most successful quit second day of Hell Week, and the guy that I would have guaranteed was not going to make it graduated, and that screwed up with my autistic brain of trying to figure out what how could this happen, right? Like as soon as I see something that I can't understand the pattern to, I get fixated on it. And one of the core findings that I had in looking at what was the common denominator of every SEAL was the fact that they were screwed up in the head. Specifically, they had significant childhood trauma that led to a strategy that produced more drive, more perseverance than the average person. And the way that you look at this is anyone that has outperformed the norm has to be thinking and acting differently than everyone else, or they wouldn't outperform the norm. And so it becomes a requirement that you think and act differently in order to have success at a high level. So what I've found is the common thread around all successful people is early childhood trauma. I want to pause there, let you kind of see if you want to push on any of that. Then I'll go into, well, what makes the difference between experiencing trauma and ending up homeless on the street or ending up successful? But thoughts, questions on any of that stuff?
Yeah, well, I was gonna make sure that you were gonna go into the water drop on the mountain, which I think you're alluded to in a second. But I love that you used the Michael Jordan metaphor because I actually think that's the perfect person to bring up in this scenario. Because if you watch The Last Dance, and if you're listening, The Last Dance is a documentary on Michael Jordan. It actually there was a full episode, it's a 10 episode docuseries, a full episode around how he used to, if he wasn't feeling great or if he felt like the competition wasn't good or he was like we were going to steamroll this team without him trying, he would actually what he would call like put himself in a dark place. Meaning, and you've heard this before with different types of endurance athletes that have a stage currently in society, and they say like when I run long distances, or for Michael when he was playing basketball, he would go to a dark place, and Michael Jordan was quoted saying like he would actually make up stories about how his opponents hurt his family. And I thought that was super interesting, and kind of along what you're talking about, Larry, is like it wasn't that Michael wasn't traumatized and that made him successful. It was that he was so traumatized that he would almost bring the experience of what he had to go through as a child. That it talks a little bit about that in the docuseries as well. He went through therapy to maybe decrease the emotional charge. I'm not sure. I'm not Michael's friend, but he would actually bring up those traumatic experiences to get himself psyched for a game so he could go beat on a team that he knew he was already going to beat on.
Well, the part of the reason I brought Jordan up was from my experience of watching that show, in that I have developed a superpower, kryptonite, right? So a superpower is I can listen to someone speak, and within not that long, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes, somewhere around there, I can hear their trauma, their core operating systems. And the depth at which their trauma resides is the second thing that I can then find out. Like, how deep is this ingrained into their psychology? And that's the superpower, right? Super useful. As many of you can see, you watch these guest episodes. I have 60 some minutes to ask someone 4 or 5 questions and understand what's driving them and help provide them with some benefit. And the downside to that is I can hear it and feel it in every conversation. And so, like, it's not something I can turn off. And show, like, watching The Last Dance was painful for me to watch every time Michael spoke, because it was so obvious to me how he is still deeply living in his trauma, right? And that has resulted in someone who's the most successful basketball player ever still not living in success, right? Not living in a joyful experience. And so his traumas still live in his psychology and in his world today, and ultimately make why most professional athletes have a very difficult time when they finish the game, because all of a sudden their traumas are unfocused, right? All their traumas and strategies were focused on their playing, their games, winning, all that stuff. Then all of a sudden you take that away from them, and now it just lives in their world. And that often creates depression, all sorts of issues with them. And so the
It's
core
an
message
identity
that we're
crisis.
getting, yeah, completely,
Yeah.
the core message that we're getting here is that if someone is more successful, like in any domain, their success is always fueled by unrecognized, unresolved trauma, which will often produce high performance at the expense of their experience of life. So when you hear Michael talk about his experience of life while he played, it was not good, right? It was miserable. And so, yes, he produced success, but two, he had a miserable life. And so that's the effects of living with trauma, at least trauma that supports us, which leads me to the point that I wanted to make before. Uh, as we've talked about many times in this show, trauma is not the experience, it's the strategy that you carry forward from experiencing a perceived loss of control early in life. Now, if trauma is merely a strategy of survival, that strategy is either going to be rewarded or punished by your world. So, what I mean by that is, once our subconscious builds that strategy at 4, 5, 6 years old, that strategy, if that strategy is rewarded by our environment, we experience success in our world. If our strategy is punished by our environment, we will experience friction, suffering, struggle, not success, right? Not accomplishments. And it doesn't take much to change it. So a tiny change in your strategy can result in either the world rewarding it, such as me, right? So my strategy is based on everything's going to go to shit. It's all my fault. Everyone I love is going to get hurt. The SEALs rewarded that strategy, right? If I would have changed that strategy by one piece and just saying everything's going to go to shit, everyone's going to get hurt, it's not my fault, I'm a victim to this, I wouldn't have been successful as a SEAL. I would have been punished. So that simple change would create a difference from me being a SEAL, successful business person that had a miserable life, to someone that was homeless on the side of the road, a victim to everything, right? And so when you think about trauma either supporting you or punishing you, it has nothing to do with the experience. It has to do with the strategy. And if that strategy is rewarded by your environment, you see success. And if that strategy is not rewarded by your environment, then you see failure. And what's crazy about that is the difference between me being homeless on the street or a successful SEAL and entrepreneur is a couple words in that strategy. That's all it takes. And so for Janice, success above and beyond the norm requires trauma that is supported by your environment. Being homeless, drug addict on the side of the road requires trauma, a subconscious strategy that is punished by your environment. That's how it works.
Yeah, I love it, and that was the most complete answer I've heard you give. I mentioned the drop on the mountain, and people might be thinking, oh, he didn't talk about that. What I meant by that is you literally have a trauma or a traumatic experience that's a droplet on the top of a mountain, and exactly what you just said, Larry. If your environment rewards it, you go down one side of the mountain. If your environment punishes it, you end up going the back side of the mountain. And by the time the droplet gets to the ground, it may have started at the top at the same position, but you're meters, yards, miles away from each other at this point, and that's where we see the difference between the billionaire and Michael Jordan and the homeless guy or the person struggling. You mentioned one thing in there that was I'll say this if you guys haven't figured this out already. Larry's language is dense, and there's probably going to be some people that rewind or restart what you just described. But there was something in there when you said Michael Jordan wasn't living in his success, and I just want to call attention to that because I think this is a perfect segue into the next question. Larry, I believe what you meant by that is that he's not happy, right? And he might seem to be happy, but people might say, "What do you mean he's not living in success? He's
He's
got the
not happy.
mansion and
Watch
the
that
shoes."
show. Watch the
Exactly.
show. He is an angry, bitter, frustrated person, right?
Yep.
That's still like one of my least, the scenes that hurt my heart, but is my favorite in illustrating that point is there's at some point where some guy talked about doing something better than him, some other player, and he was ready to fight the guy at that point in time, right? Like 30 years later, where it makes no difference. Like that's
Yep.
how much he is still unhappy, which is
Yep.
so sad because look at everything he did to produce unbelievable results in the world. And if there's anyone that should be happy, fulfilled, feel like they've accomplished something, it's him. Yet he doesn't get to live in that because his traumas still rule his experience.
Absolutely. Which is a perfect segue. Let's talk about this. This is from Kyle around Matt's episode. Kyle says, Larry, you and Matt talked about how he was doing everything for the people he loves, waking up at 2 a.m. so he could be at his kid's school on time, making sure his wife could retire, taking care of everyone around him, right? And you kind of frame that as a problem. Kyle goes on to say, I'm sorry, that sounds like a great dad and husband to me. What exactly is wrong with sacrificing for the people you love? Isn't that what we're supposed to do?
I'm not allowed to say that Kyle's wrong too. So no, Kyle, you
Kyle, we
did
love you.
great job in asking this question.
and and you're wrong.
And you're wrong, right? And it's funny because Janice and Kyle aren't wrong, right? They are in this process of exploring their subconscious, right? Like that's the cool part about this show is it's not just entertaining to listen to, it's going to start bringing your subconscious into your conscious mind. And within that, your subconscious is going to try and defend itself. Like it's going to want to keep its status quo because that's what's kept you alive so long. And so the questions they're bringing up are so perfect because they are the core defense mechanisms of the subconscious, all of ours. So like these thought processes are required to keep your subconscious strategies in your life. So going back to Kyle's answer, this is actually one of my favorite strategies personally is suffering and sacrificing for others' love,
And to be
right?
clear, when you say favorite, it's the one that you do the most.
Yes, it's the one I like to rely on the most to keep myself safe, which makes sense when you hear, my background, right? Being a SEAL is all about suffering and sacrificing, being willing to risk your life for everyone, to give up everything in the efforts of showing your love. And so this is one of the sneakiest subconscious strategies because it's so easy to stand on how good it is, right? Look at what I do for everyone. I do everything for anyone. I will stay up. I will spend my money. I will give up my life in order to show my love for someone else. And it is very easy to live like Kyle's saying is like, well, that's just what a good dad and husband does, right? They live in absolute stress and anxiety. Oh, wait, no, that's not what Kyle meant, but that's what Matt was saying, right? Why was he up at 2 in the morning? Because he can't sleep, because he's in absolute stress and anxiety, because if he doesn't perform for his family, they won't love him. And so there is where we find the problem in this environment where you have to suffer and sacrifice for other people's love. You are creating a conditional relationship. It's a trade. I have to act a certain way. And if I act a certain way, you'll love me. The more that I act in that way, the more you love me. And love is infinite. Love is not transactional. And so when you live in a conditional relationship with love, you are only living on half of the side. And what's crazy about this, and people often get shocked at this, then they get really sad. Those of us that do that, that I firmly put myself in that category, and I know your history, you like this one too, right?
Just a little bit.
So people like us are the most selfish people in the world. And this is
Mm,
where everyone gets mad at me. Like, what are you talking about? I'm not selfish. I'll do anything for anyone. Well, the
mm,
reality is when you do something for others, when you suffer and sacrifice for others, do you feel good or do you feel bad? And the answer is we feel good, right? We get
mhm.
to feel that fulfillment of doing something for someone else. But I guarantee all of you out there that are like us, that like to suffer and sacrifice to show love for others, I bet you don't receive very well. I bet you don't get to have a lot of help. And so what you're doing is stealing all the good feelings, right? The good feelings come from showing love to someone else and having them receive it. And when we live in this strategy, we don't receive. So we're selfish. We get to do good and feel good for everything we do for everyone else, but we steal all of that from everyone else. And so that's usually where people get sad of like, oh no, I thought I was being selfless, but I'm actually being selfish. And the kicker for this is like, okay, well, how do we make you not feel sad now? How do we get to happy? We get to happy because you've built up this reservoir of people that want to do stuff for you, right? So if you've been like us, where you suffer and sacrifices, you've benefited people's lives for so long, but you don't receive. So it's like this dam with all this water behind it, all this love sitting there waiting to come your way. And so all you have to do is to open the dam by being allowed to receive unconditionally and to give unconditionally. And to give unconditionally means that I can't suffer for your love. And at that point, we start to get even flow.
Yeah, it's funny. You and I have had this conversation so many times, and even when you said, like, put yourself in it, you said, Steve and I are selfish in this regard. I still got uncomfortable, which was an interesting experience for me. And again, dense concept there, but super important. And the metaphor I always use, and we've talked about this, Larry, is the candle, right? The two candles, right? If I have a candle, and let's say my girlfriend has a candle, and hers is lit and mine isn't, right? And she wants to light my candle by showing me love, right? If I guard that candle, right? If I suffocate the relationship from oxygen and say like, no, like I have to make sure that your candle's lit because you're my girlfriend and it's my job to take care of you, but you're not allowed to light mine, right? When she goes to try to light mine, she's going to be sad, right? And I get to be selfish by like, no, 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 I took care of you. I'm okay. But the second I let her light my candle, both of our candles are lit. She's ecstatic. And because I received it, I get to now have a lit candle. And it's like
Yeah.
we get it backwards all the time. It's like, no, hers stays lit, mine stays unlit. That's how I show her love. It's like, no. She wants to light my candle, let her light it, and we're both gravy.
And I think a foundation of this, and I don't think I want to get into this deep because I'm sure it'll come up in a future thing, but I just want to like prime it, put it out there. Uh, we there's a difference between showing love and feeling or experiencing love,
Hmm.
right? We mix those together. We put them together, meaning if I want Steve to experience the love I have for him, I have to show him that I love him. But showing and experiencing are two different pieces. The experience of love comes through in my experience, when another receives mine. So when you receive my showing of love, I experience love. You don't experience it, you're shown it. When
Hmm.
you show me love and I receive it, you experience the feeling of love. And so that's where, when we connect the two, when we connect showing with experiencing, we get it wrong. And so if I want someone to experience the feeling of love, it is in my reception that they do that, not in my showing.
Exactly right. Yeah, if I want my girlfriend to experience it, all I got to do is let her light my candle. Right? All I got to
Yes.
do, I don't have to do anything. I just got to receive it, which
Yep.
is it's funny, it's so simple yet so hard sometimes. And it's just
And it's
like,
backwards. Like, we have a
oh,
backwards understanding of that, where,
100%.
yeah. And so that's I refer to it as the true nature of love.
I love it. I love it. And that we probably have time for one more question. That's a perfect segue. I'm going to skip around a little bit. This one's from Eric, and I'm just going to read what Eric wrote us. He said, Larry, you told Matt if he stopped going to work tomorrow, his family would still love him and he'd actually experience more love. That's not, now let's see if Eric's using the word experience the right way. That sounds nice, Larry, but the mortgage doesn't care about my trauma. If I stop going to work, we lose the house. Can you explain what you actually meant by that? Because I don't think you're telling people to quit their jobs, but it kind of sounded like
I was telling Matt to quit his job.
it. What about the average listener who
Well, this is
decided
an
they
important
shouldn't?
distinction, right?
Yep.
So the conversation Matt is different. And if you go back and listen to it again, what came right before that statement, I asked Matt, do you have enough to be safe and live the life that you want? And I know from my experience with him as a client, he does, right? So he literally can stop working tomorrow, and his family, and he's made enough that the next generation, like his kids, would not have to worry about being okay. Like, no one's going to be broke down by the river. Now, there are many people out there that if they stopped working tomorrow, they would be broke down by the river. So you don't get the same advice, right? So there is this, and the biggest point that we can bring out of this question and this perspective is, for many people, especially high functioning people, people that have produced accomplishments in their life, we live in the constant false view that there isn't enough and that it's all going to go away. And since most of the people that I work with are successful or high functioning, they're above average performers, the vast majority of my clients, when I ask them the question, could you ever end up homeless down by the river? They always answer yes to start with, and it's always a lie. That's not true. It's not possible anymore. And so one of the key points to this is really distinguishing or differentiating between your actual situation and how you feel about it. So Matt's actual situation is he is completely safe. How does he feel about it? He can't sleep. He's up at 2 a.m. So that gap between your actual situation and how you feel about it, that's where trauma lives. The bigger the trauma, the bigger the gap between what is real and what I feel about what is real. And so the biggest lesson to be learned around this is we need to pay attention to both. Like, what is my objective environment situation, and how do I feel about that? And is there a big gap there?
So this is a whole nother conversation that I'm excited to get into on a different episode. But just to wrap this up, for the listeners of this, if I'm living in a reality where I'm not Matt, right? I'm not a super ultra successful business broker, and I am living paycheck to paycheck, let's say, right? I do have to continue to work to pay my mortgage and keep a roof over my family. Um, where do I take the advice that you're giving? If I understand you when you say close the gap, right? So my actual situation is that I'm living paycheck to paycheck, but that's producing a ton of experienced obligation in my life, I'll call it. Like I'm not happy, I'm living from a sense of obligation, and I hear you say I quit my job and I want to quit it, but now I'm hearing you say I can't quit it. What advice do you have for somebody who's living in that space?
They're probably not going to like it. Should I give it anyway?
Yes. Because
right?
I'll wrap it in a pretty bow.
Okay, good. So, if you are living in a world where you are not able to meet your minimal needs, right? Or you're on the risk of not being able to meet your minimal needs, you have to become more valuable to the world. And that has nothing to do with your worth as a human. Your worth as a human is infinite. So you are a perfect manifestation of God that is not producing enough value in your world. And that's a key piece. Value is a subjective assessment of the change that you can produce, right? So the change I could produce in the world will be wanted or not wanted. And if it's wanted, it's valuable. And so if you are in that situation, your job is to become more valuable, right? Not more worthy, like you have infinite worth, but to produce more value, which means that you have to start looking at where in your world do people want things, and how can I learn, practice, and gain experience to produce more power to create those things. If you do that, you produce more value, the world will reward you. And that again has nothing to do with your worth. So where this goes for that person is, well, you have to figure out how to produce more value in the world. And as a human, the core recipe for that is always learn something, gain practice it, and gain experience, right? In that we produce more value. Living in your false view of the world won't help. That's where this subconscious work comes into play, because if I live in the world where I'm useless, I can't learn, I'm not, where all those lies, the false views, well, then we can't ever produce more value. We can't produce more value. Then you're going to still live in the brink of disaster.
Yeah, I'm really, really glad. If you didn't say it, I was going to say it, the learn, practice, experience formula for this, because I think a lot of people feel stuck. And I was one of those people for a very, very long time, and I still have bouts of feeling stuck because I found a place where I produce a lot of value. And now I'm like, well, if I leave, it'll be only a matter of time before I'm homeless under the bridge. And that's not true because I have this formula, and the formula is learn, practice, experience. Like any of us can learn anything, and then with a bit of practice and experience in it, we can then take our new knowledge to a place that's going to quote unquote value it more. When you were talking, I was thinking, I'm going to wrap it up with this. I was thinking about the little commercial with the water bottle. I don't know if you've seen this one, but it basically says, this commercial is this kid and he's walking along and he's sad. He's down on his luck, and his dad talks to him about the value he brings to his friend group, to society, to school. And he says, "What's the value of a water bottle in Costco?" And the kid apparently knew economics pretty well. He said $1. It's like, okay, what's the value of the water bottle at the pizza shop? Maybe 250. What's the value of the water bottle on an airplane or in an airport? Let's go $6. All right, now what's the value of that water bottle on an airplane? Like aside from the little free cup you get, it was like $9 for that same bottle of water that was $1 at Costco. And I think that visual that I've always had is your value is so subjective, as you said a moment ago, Larry, that all you have to do is identify an environment where it's going to be where you're going to produce more value because it's subjective anyway. Learn, practice, and experience how to produce value in that environment, and you're good as golden. Which
Yeah, how much is that water bottle valued in the desert for someone
it's priceless.
dehydrated? I'll give
Yeah.
everything. Every
Yeah.
dollar I've got. And where we live in today's world is a unique place in that many years ago, the learn side of it was very hard, and the knowledge was hard to get to, and it was expensive. Then the internet came around, and we had access to any piece of knowledge you want. Now we have artificial intelligence, generative AI, that will teach you anything you want exactly the way you need it to be taught. So I don't believe there's any excuse for any person that wants to become more valuable in this world than we are in the current state that we are now, in that you have not only access to every piece of information in the world exists, but you have a teacher that will teach it to you in any way you want, in the best way for you. So for what, free? I think now, any which way you want it. So I think that's, and again, the distinction I made over and over again is your value and your worth are two different things. Self-worth is you're a perfect manifestation of the divine. Value is completely dependent on your environment. So overall, I think good questions, even though two of the three were wrong to start with, but it's okay.
Eric
Within
gets
that
the gold
place,
star.
don't have that be a reason not to send your question. I promise we won't say that every time, because these are very useful, and being able to cover these things they become some of the core concepts that are necessary to be learned to get free from your subconscious strategy. So, Steve, thank you for being the co-host on this. A hell of a lot more fun than reading it off a piece of paper. And for all you listeners out there, thank you very much for sending the questions, and please keep sending them to us. These are some of the most fun we get to do, because it's exactly what you want to learn. And with that, we will see you next time.
Thanks, Larry. See you guys.
Thank you for joining another episode of Capital T Truth. Go to truepathmastery.com and you'll see a podcast link there. Within that, you can subscribe to all our channels, get notified when our new episodes are coming out, as well as be able to reach us to send us questions. You can send that to podcast@truepathmastery.com. And if you send us that email or submit it through the website, we'll be able to get your question answered live on air.